So, you're thinking about starting a business, but you don't know if you should form a company, be a sole proprietor, or maybe enter into a partnership agreement. Okay, so maybe you aren't really starting a business, but you just need to understand the differences between these three different business forms. Well, heck, either way, stick around to find out more. When an entrepreneur decides to start a business, they have to choose if the business will be its own legal entity or an extension of themselves. Being a separate legal entity limits the risk associated with the business significantly, and it makes it easier to sell ownership and raise capital. In fact, one really great aspect of corporations is that the liability of the owners is limited to what they have already invested in the business. That means that even if the company loses a lawsuit, the courts cannot award the personal assets of the investors to the plaintiff. So, there, that was easy. All done. Everyone should just be a corporation, right? Well, not exactly. Corporations also pay tax on their profits before they give those profits to the shareholders, who then again pay tax on the profits that the company just paid taxes on. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Corporations are subject to double taxation in the United States. That's because each legal entity has to pay tax on its profit, and the investor and the company are separate legal entities, so each has to pay taxes. Okay, but other than that, corporations must be the best option, right? Well, once again, it really depends on the situation. Corporations require the most robust documentation to start up, and that can be difficult and potentially expensive if you have to hire an attorney to do all the write-up for you. Okay, so let's contrast the previous situation with that of a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietor simply goes to work. They don't need to write articles of incorporation at all. Any income that they manage to earn simply gets added to their personal tax filing, making taxes easier and lower than it is for a corporation. Okay, so now we can see that sole proprietorships are clearly the best, right? Well, you see a pattern here? Once again, not exactly. Imagine the sole proprietor needs to access the capital to grow the business. Can they sell shares? No, because the business isn't a separate entity from themselves. Their capital is limited to the capital that they can raise, either from savings, borrowing against, or selling maybe their own home or some other assets. But what about risk? Well, the sole proprietor is liable for the business. If someone gets hurt and the business is negligent, the sole proprietor will have to pay for the damages, and there is no limit on how much those damages could go. In fact, the entrepreneur might end up bankrupt and could even lose their house, car, and personal belongings if the situation got bad enough. Well, it seems like neither of these two forms of business are strictly dominant over the other, but how do they compare to a partnership? Partnerships share the pass-through tax benefits associated with sole proprietorships while providing access to the capital of multiple investors, so that part seems great. The risk exposure depends on what type of partnership is being formed. In the case of a limited partnership, there's one general partner who has unlimited liability, and the rest of the partners have limited liability. So at least there is a limit to the risk. So that's still much worse than the limited liability associated with a corporation. As you can see, picking the best form of business really depends upon a person's situation. Each has advantages and each has disadvantages. It really comes down to managing the trade-offs and trying to limit the downside of your chosen form. For example, if you're a sole proprietor, having a good liability insurance policy can go a long way to protecting your personal assets. But that policy comes at a cost. Or forming a partnership where some of the partners have a lot of capital to invest might help to reduce the problem of raising capital. Or forming a corporation if the business is new and not yet making money because there won't be any income to pay taxes on. You really need to decide which aspects are the most important to you as an entrepreneur, and then just do the best that you can to manage the rest once you begin operations.